John F. Kennedy once said, "Leadership and learning are indispensable to each other." A new generation is stepping forward. They navigate economic uncertainty, technological acceleration, and a shifting global order. They are not only tomorrow's leaders, they are shaping decisions today. The future will not wait. It is already taking form. Welcome to the panel. Youth Speak. We listen.
Hello, and welcome to the first panel of the Youth Speak, We Listen, the SDG panel. We're going to go off with a series of questions and an introduction from the panelists, and then we'll leave it off to the audience for questions. Let us start off with Lynn from Jordan, who is a social development expert leading a civil society organization, Weasel for Awareness and Education. So Lynn, if you have to reimagine the SDGs, what would that look like?
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today to discuss development in these extremely turbulent times we are going through. When I think of sustainable development goals, a phrase often comes to mind. What affects some of us directly affects all of us indirectly. We can see that, for example, in the Ukraine war. The Ukraine war has led to a lot of turbulence, loss of lives, and destruction. But it has also led to food insecurity, rising energy prices, and dismantled supply chains. When we go back to 2015, when the SDGs were drafted, we lived in a very different world than the one that we live in today. Since then, we've overcome a global pandemic, several wars, cuts in international aid, and climate change disasters. These have all slowed down the progress of the SDGs, as we are only on track to achieve 17% of them. So the real question is how do we create systems that are resilient in these times of dramatic change? Since COVID-19, technology has had a huge boom. Digital learning and artificial intelligence are now at the fingertips of the average Joe. This can be used to create jobs and boost economies forward. But one question we must ask ourselves is technology reducing or increasing the inequality gap? Currently, and as we speak, there are 2.6 million people living without internet access. That is 1/3 of the world's population. SDGs are universal solutions, but they can't be a one-size-fits-all. The way they are implemented in a rural community, in a refugee camp, or in a big city is very different, and progress must be left to the local communities to determine. We must rethink how we define development. When we think of development, we often think of infrastructure in buildings, energies, and roads. But true development is development in human capital. It's investment in people, because when you invest in people, they drive forward every SDG. Another issue is how development is financed. Many times, we finance small, fragmented, short-term projects. But we need to start thinking of financing systematic, long-term projects that have multiplier effects. For example, when we fund education, we are funding job creation, economies boom, and impact in investment is increased in these countries. A term that I like is, or a phrase that I like, is do things with what you have rather than what you need. A lot of the times, people think the solution is more money, but the solution in reality is unlocking resources. It's unlocking resources in human capital, in people, and in what we have to make the possible change. The SDGs remain a powerful framework. The real question is not whether the goals are right, but whether the systems we use to pursue them are fit for the world we live in today. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lynn. Now we're moving on to Berat, who is from Turkey, a CEO of Bankable Zero, a strategic advisory firm based in New York. He has a background in international relations and finance, and given that, can you give me a system-level perspective and suggestion for navigating the SDGs in this time?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start with thanking the Nizami Gencevi International Center for convening us here in Baku. I believe the current conjuncture makes this forum and the center's mission even more important going further. At a time like this, we need more diplomacy, more cooperation, and more renewed efforts for peaceful coexistence. As someone with a background in international relations and finance, I have been reflecting on recent developments and would like to offer a brief perspective on current trends. The world I grew up in was fairly based in a narrative that promoted multilateralism, institutions, trade, and connectivity. With few exceptions, this order was getting its core principles from 1648 Westphalia Agreement, which at its core underlines the states as sovereign entities and sets the ground principles for modern diplomacy. To illustrate what happened from then throughout 2026 would be quite time-consuming, perhaps boring for this esteemed audience. However, it is perhaps important to underline that the system principles that date back to 1648 are not valid in 2026. It appears that the post-1945 system and its principles are also no longer fully effective. You probably observed the announcement and confirmations at the recent Munich Security Conference, where the architects of the global system stated, quote, "The old world is gone." I believe discussions we had in 3 days at Baku Forum did also confirm this understanding. And a great deal of divergence expressed by Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has become a reference point for reflections at Baku Forum as well. Such radical shifts and unpredictability were historically associated with the global South, in broader terms, the non-Western world. Way back, when I was working at one of the biggest asset managers in Europe, with a portfolio of $1 trillion in 3 different asset classes, the system, when covering sovereign risks, was predominantly focusing on risks in developing nations. Perhaps too much of this analysis in the market has historically focused on developing nations rather than assigning a fair, reliable, and realistic probability of such risks materializing in Western world. Ladies and gentlemen, executives who understand the zeitgeist of today will be the shapers and therefore part of the new economy. The rest, as has been the case for centuries, will be left behind. That brings me to the second part of my intervention. In the age of AI, as nations compete for artificial general intelligence, or AGI, it is crucial for every nation and every enterprise to have a strategy. The recent competition around responsible AI between Anthropic, which is well known with the product Claude, and OpenAI is a significant signal for the future, which is directly related to SDGs 8, 9, 10, 11, and 16. Millions of jobs may be lost, so we must manage risks while expanding the pie for wider population. And using AI to reduce those inequalities are crucial. In these turbulent times, the SDGs serves as a lighthouse for much of the world that continues to believe in multilateralism, diplomacy, secular institutions, and peaceful, coherent societies. For societies, especially those in the Global South, integrating those factors can increase the likelihood of external financial flows that is needed in those jurisdictions. Based on my experience in asset management and sustainable development, I see 5 factors that could make this possible. First, human capital. Innovation moves so fast that nothing remains relevant without continuous learning and ability to embrace failure. Second, strong institutions and rule of law. Without trust in institutions, other efforts often fail. Systems that give everyone equal opportunities will continue to thrive. Third, sustainability and innovation. When the speed of innovation is so fast, the opportunities and challenges that come with it are also significant. To keep enjoying clean water, a cup of coffee, a delicious meal with loved ones, we must care for our environment and resources. Our latest research at Bankable Zero underlined that 84% of the institutional investors are looking for opportunities that are focusing on SDGs. For the Global South, this issue is not about funding. The absence of funding is not the case, but the ability to attract capital to drive innovation in these vibrant times is very important and essential. Fourth factor is social cohesion. It is crucial for lasting societal value and prosperity. Finally, the fifth is strategic infrastructure. All other factors that I just mentioned on functioning networks and without 5G and 6G connectivity, those will not be possible. To conclude, today we live in a very different world than yesterday. AI and revolutionary innovations are bringing both opportunities and risks. Therefore, to ensure peaceful, coherent, and prospective societies, sustainable development goals as a guiding principles will be a great compass for adapting policies that are relevant for the challenges of today. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Okay, that was a bit over time, so no questions for you, Berat. Mariam is from our host country, Azerbaijan, an international youth policy and gender expert and educator, co-founded and co-leads the Gender Hub Azerbaijan, advocating women's rights and economic empowerment. So based on your experience, what is the role of NGOs and CSOs for shaping the SDG agenda?
Thank you. Dear Excellencies, youth leaders, it's such an honor to be with you at the same panel, especially in times of uncertainty and in times of such a shrinking spaces for a lot of NGOs and civil societies across the globe. And thank you for this question. And I want to share my personal story with you first. 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, when SDGs were adopted, back then, my organization, an international organization I was representing at the time, had a special event with Youth Envoy in UN. That was the first time actually I went and saw how the international development structures work, the UN structures worked, and each of us as a chapter, and I was representing Azerbaijan, were asked to commit ourselves to certain SDGs. And back then I committed myself to quality education and gender equality and education, not just what we are told at universities, but also non-formal education, human rights education, and education that we actually get from people we talk to, the stories we share, and the empathy we build through this non-formal education. And 10 years from now, of course, through the organization I represent now, we try to make sure that we commit and contribute to 4 SDGs, because the organization I represent is mainly working on women's rights advocacy and economic empowerment of women and girls, because we believe that in order to really have this meaningful empowerment. It's not just about talking and giving one-time help, but making sure that they're encouraged to have a long-term sustainability of their expertise. So not to teach them, not to give them just a fish, but how to actually catch a fish. And this is the way that we stand here when we work with vulnerable communities, especially with women representing vulnerable groups, women in rural areas, women survivors of violence, women who are single mothers, women who are with disabilities, who also have special kids with disabilities and who need also special care, because unfortunately, one of the reasons why women are not so much in the decision-making and not so much in a meaningful decision-making is because of the career steps that she still has this glass ceiling that we talk about, and childcare and house care is mostly on women. The other thing that we talk about when we talk about SDGs is reproductive health agenda. It's SDG number 3, good health and well-being. It's of course SDG 5, SDG 8, economic growth, and SDG 10, reduced inequalities, because we believe that through making sure that everyone has not equal, but equitable access, because the one thing that we have been discussing with a lot of women organizations globally is equality is not the same word that should be used that it used to be 50 years ago, because now we need more innovation in this, and the innovation here is making sure that we have equity, because in order to make sure that we have access to opportunities, that we have enough resources for everyone, we need to tailor down and target the needs of these people. We cannot say, oh, we're all equal, then go and find your way yourself, because we are, most of us here, already privileged. Yes, we worked hard to be here, we worked smart to be here, but we also had certain support system from our families, from the communities we represent. Just being born in a capital is already somehow a privilege. Just being a loved child in the family is already a privilege. So many girls are unborn because of the sex-selective abortion, because they are not wanted, because there is still some preference in this part of the world. And we rarely talk about that, but there are small things that we forget that actually they are a privilege and we don't know that. So that's why, in order to be with the vulnerable communities, in order to make sure that we become their voice, we need to listen to them, and we need to create these safe spaces for them where they can share their needs, where they can share actually the real solution that we don't see sometimes from top. We need to have this bottom-up approach, and dialogue with grassroots, working with grassroots is one of the things that civil society is doing. And that's a message I would like to bring, that civil society is the key player in ensuring that all the voices regarding of their backgrounds or any kind of identities are actually on the table for the decision making.
Very much. Now going from civil societies to Sofia, born from the on the Mexican-American border, going to Harvard, then Tsinghua, then Stanford, and now the CEO of Radar Therapeutics, a biotech company. Also, Sofia is a board member of the International Alliance for mRNA Medicines, founded by BioNTech. So Sofia, now that we've touched on the CSOs, NGOs, but how can private industry advance the SDGs?
So I'll talk about my industry. I believe an industry that directly impacts health, food safety, and clean energy, and that industry is biotechnology. To me, biotechnology is an industry that is about technologies of survival and of thriving. So biotechnology is for the creation of novel medicines for cancer, autoimmune disease, other terrible diseases. They're technologies to engineer crops, to survive drought, to feed populations. It's also technologies to produce fuels and materials that don't destroy the planet or deplete resources that we can't regenerate. And it is how we prepare for pandemics before millions die. And so many of us remember in the COVID-19 pandemic, Moderna designed a candidate for a vaccine within 48 hours. Traditionally, vaccines take 7 to 10 years to develop, and Moderna was able to dose its first patient within 66 days of receiving a sequence from a group of Chinese scientists of the virus. This was unprecedented. Within a year, we had emergency use authorization for mRNA-based vaccines, and we started saving millions of lives. We think at least 20 million lives saved by mRNA vaccines alone. And this was unprecedented, and this was really only possible because of public funding from Germany and the United States, because of scientific infrastructure in place in those countries, previous investments in human capital, a decade of very patient and socially responsible investment. And I'll note that Moderna was founded in 2010, BioNTech in 2008, so that's many, many years before the pandemic hit. Neither were founded to work on vaccines. Neither had a commercial product approved by the time the pandemic came. And so I think that just goes to show that sometimes science leads to good outcomes in very unexpected ways, and in ways that the world ended up needing. And so I think that this conversation is important now because we are living in the most exciting time possible for scientific innovation, in my view. But we are also living in a time that is unprecedented in terms of the inflection point and chaos that major governments like the US are infecting into science. So for the past century, major biomedical breakthroughs have reliably happened or been led by the United States. From the US's leadership position in the Human Genome Project at the turn of the century to the US government investing nearly $6 billion in public funds to support the COVID-19 vaccine alone, and that doesn't include previous investments. And the US agencies investing heavily in biodefense and disease surveillance across the world. But that leadership is now being actively dismantled by an anti-science, anti-vaccine agenda in the United States. Staff at the US's premier infectious disease institutes have been heavily cut. They've been ordered to remove the words biodefense and pandemic preparedness from their websites. Our premier research institute, the National Institutes of Health workforce, where I know you worked, Salko, they've had their budget threatened. They've had 20% of their workforce cut. The US has withdrawn once again from the WHO, and as many people know here, there are concerted efforts to build in vaccine skepticism and dismantle the infrastructure that produces them, disincentivize companies from producing vaccines. And so I say this as someone who runs a company in the United States. At this time, the world cannot rely on the United States to be the guarantor for global public health. China, at the same time, has been moving decisively in the other direction. 20 years ago, China was a manufacturer of generics, much like India is today. And today, Chinese researchers publish over 60% of high-impact synthetic biology research. They run 25% of all global clinical trials. 1/3 of new drugs are licensed by major pharma companies now originate in China. That number was essentially 0 4 years ago. And this has happened through a very deliberate all-of-nation commitment. They wrote it explicitly into their 5-year plans. Build the talent pool, streamline regulation, support university-based research, and dominate manufacturing. And so I think the lesson is very clear. Biotechnology leadership is not by accident. It is by directed policy. It's a choice. And so where does that leave the rest of the world? So I have been starting to see in my work the Middle East, East Asia, Australia, starting to join networks of global industry alliances like the Alliance for mRNA Medicine, start to find ways to invest in academic science and bring biomanufacturing. Europe has had excellent science for a long time, and actually a population much larger than the United States, but very little growth capital and too few mechanisms to pull discovery out of universities and into companies. The Baltic states in Eastern Europe are building clinical manufacturing hubs and producing excellent talent. I'll note that my co-founder is actually from Estonia. And I'll note another example, a friend of mine who runs a company called Sensible Biotechnologies. When they could have built anywhere in the world, they chose to build in Bratislava. And so their main labs are in Bratislava and at Oxford. They're building a global mRNA platform that can both design and manufacture mRNA. They've gotten public funding from NATO, and they've gotten private venture capital investment, and they make sure that their talent pool is based in Bratislava so that they can build up that talent pool. And I think that is an excellent model of how a country can build national health resilience and how private industry can partner with the public. And actually, it is a good time because many talented scientists are leaving the US. They're either going home or trying to rehome. Many companies are trying to operate in new ways and actually seeking partnership with countries all across the world. So the opportunity is real, but it does require countries and regions to make deliberate choices. So these are invest in human capital, as Lynn mentioned, harmonize regulations across borders so that companies don't have to navigate separate approval processes, build shared research infrastructure, and regional disease surveillance networks, create patient capital. So this is public, multilateral, or public-private investment that can fund the long cycles that biotech requires. And so one of the speakers of this forum, Mohamed Amersi, told us earlier today, if you want to plant for 1 year, you'll get rice, but if you plant for 10 years, you'll get a tree. So biotechnology is that tree. The countries that plant it now in talent, in infrastructure, in manufacturing, they will have the jobs, the exports, the sovereign capacity to protect their own population when the next pandemic arrives, and it will come.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sophia. We're going to move on to Mr. Marcel from Poland, who is a quantum scientist, quantum physics, studied at Imperial College London, had some work in NASA, and is now currently working in a deep tech VC, advocates scientific diplomacy, has a fascination with microstates, the Beatles.
You might think so. I couldn't possibly comment.
Fair enough. I want to ask you, Marcel, you have a broad range of interests, but I want to ask you, like, the role of science and scientific diplomacy in meeting the SDGs.
I'd like to provide an overview that sort of ties up everything we've said and what has been said before. Bridging divides in the world of transition. And I want to tell you that this transition actually can be the most useful thing in bridging those divides. Obviously, I'd like to advocate the scientific approach, this scientific diplomatic approach, if I may say so. But for that, we have to diagnose the situation. Lynn has told us that only 17% of SGD goals have been achieved. Tobias Elwood, before, I think yesterday, pointed out that the World Trade Organization doesn't work, that the World Health Organization has so many struggles, that the UN Council is not able to leverage its decisions. And I'd argue that we don't need to find a new unifying force for the global order. We already have science, and that's what we should be using. But saying that science will solve everything without providing an infrastructure for that is foolish. I wouldn't like to do that. And the simplest point of starting is to reinvent the financial model for all of that. As the president of the WHO has pointed out, no institution is independent until its budget is truly independent. And as Sophia has pointed out, we don't really know how to spend money. Sometimes we just fund something, and after 10 years, miraculously, we've got a breakthrough that leads to miraculous advances. So I'd like to propose to reinvent the way we measure SDGs. It shouldn't really be a target, a fixed deliverable that by 2030 we should remove certain problems. I propose to move to a new way of financing our goals, to a retroactive spending of public goods, where the company, the institution that has performed the best, receives the biggest share of funding. And it all may sound artificial, sort of detached. So I'd like to chat about my personal experience as a quantum physicist. Quantum technologies account for 25% of the global GDP. Your phones are a quantum technology. And those that we are creating now are supposed to be even more powerful. And let's not neglect that. As has been pointed out, science is an indirect force for delivering change. And I think the most important aspect of it is that science is incredibly international. 33% of all the papers published in the US, according to the National Science Foundation, are international collaborations. Why do we have to establish new bodies or reinvent those that exist if we've already got that base? That's something we should leverage. And to finish off, I'd like to talk about values. I think that was something that we discussed the most among all the leaders here. that once you've implanted good values, everything will be a matter of execution and persistence. So I call you all to be flexible and free and execute your vision.
Oh, thank you. Last but certainly not least, Keita, who is from the same country as one of our co-chairs, Latvia. She's an economist working in the international finance at the OECD, specifically focused on infrastructure investment. She's interested in the effects of digitalization on societies and has previously worked on this in Latvia. So, Keita, what do the SDGs of the future look like, and what will it take to achieve them?
Thank you so much. I'm in a tough position of wrapping up this very impressive panel, and in general, over the last few days, been preparing for this panel, I've been thinking of what is it that I really can tell you that you don't already know, because I am humbled over these last few days in front of everything that you do know. Maybe not how to make my favorite sandwich, because that's only my dad, but we can talk about that on the sidelines. But perhaps I can interest you in two kind of grains of thought. One is, thanks for being a great example of how to organize a youth participation program effectively. In many fireside chats and interactions with you all, one recurring theme and recurring thought I've encountered is that the key to any kind of consensus is meeting as humans. And the last few days have been filled with meetings as humans, past titles, past geographies, past anything that could stop between us. It's just been a genuine conversation, and I think that's needed more than ever, especially in the current circumstances. So I thank you all for that. But to bring to my observation, and perhaps something that may interest you, is this recurring theme throughout these last few days that has been this people and leaders versus systems argument. And I do think the truth is somewhere in the middle, but I'm not here to discuss it. But I'm afraid that with the focus on technology, on defense, we've lost a bit of this people's aspect of it all. Because sustainable development goals for whom? It's for us. And so I heard a lot of people also mention this political emotion that needs to drive change, that without political will and leadership, system reforms become cosmetic. But where do we source this political will and leadership and values if the younger generations like my own have grown up to be consumers and observers? Not in the economic sense entirely, but in a social sense. I think if we want values and leaders, we need to talk more about the social impact of the technological change that we already see occurring. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a Luddite. I don't go entirely against everything that Marcel has talked about. I think technology brings so many economic growth, it elevates people's lives across the world as it has done before, and it continues doing so. But we have also moved people online at an unprecedented pace without really considering the human aspects of it all. That's how we've grown up. I've grown up looking at TV shows, watching movies, playing video games. This has massively replaced the ways how people have grown up before. And I think this instant gratification, whenever we desire, at the ends of our fingertips, so the phones, is it's an addictive device. And I think with that, we've been raised to be observers, and our participation muscle, which is a critical element of democracies, has atrophied a little bit. We do not know really how to participate in real life, because the fake life, as you can refer to it, is so much more easier, it's so much more gratifying. And I think we see this in low rates of participation in voting. I think we see this in youth susceptibility to populism. Many such cases, and I observe it amongst our peers. And when we have these conversations and I bring this up, they completely agree. We know about everything, but that tends to overwhelm us. So we don't really stand up for something. Values are lost because they're not practiced. Communities are beginning to be lost because they're not practiced. Because we have a whole generation addicted to their phones. I think this is tragic on a human level, but I think it's even more tragic in the current geopolitical context, where we need to be rooted in values, where we need to just stand up for them. We sometimes almost, not almost, but we need to go to war for them. I think our Ukrainian friends are witnesses of this more than anyone. So when we talk about SDGs and we talk about the future and we talk about technology, I would strongly invite you to think about the human aspects of it and think about investment also in culture, in education, and how you shape this education and how you operate technologies in a positive way while restricting their negative impacts on who we are as human beings. Thank you so much.
And now that the youth spoke, you listened, it is time for questions from you to this youth panel. Please. Very good. The madam in the front. Is there a microphone on standby? Here is I will get
it. My name is Hafsat Abiola. I'm from Nigeria. I'm sorry, Mr. Moderator, but I don't really have a question.
Go ahead.
I just am so deeply inspired to have listened to all of you. And I still remember when I was very young, as you are, and I thought the whole world was still ahead. And just to see how brilliant, how thoughtful, how engaged each of you is in the work that you're doing. If you wouldn't mind, I just want to recommend that you stay connected in your community that you've created and continue to support each other. It will really make a difference. Africans, we say, if you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together. And I hope that you continue your journeys together. And if we could have some way to stay connected with you, maybe through a newsletter that you send out, and that in that newsletter you put requests, things that you need. I know personally I would be so honored to be a witness to your journey, and I just want to wish you the very best. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I feel like the youth might want that. Anyone else that has any questions, comments, suggestions?
Salko, maybe you have to ask us questions now.
Okay.
Why have you been holding back? Give us all.
I guess I have to ask the questions if the audience doesn't have any. So I want to go back to Sophia. You mentioned that we need to start planting new trees, like from this conversation we had today. So where do you start planting the new trees?
Yeah, I do think the first step is for areas like biotechnology or science generally, you need to train talent first. And so this is a lot of investment into public education, investment into universities, investment into science and culture, liberal arts. But certainly you need to invest in exceptional talent in scientific rigor first to build the talent pool. And secondly, if you are a country that does have that, then I think investing in biomanufacturing is actually really important. Biomanufacturing, you can invest in the entire part of the supply chain, but biomanufacturing directly builds national health resilience, so you can build something versus buy it. It lets you skip to a high value add part of the supply chain. It also trains talent, and then that same talent is able to pull, back in the supply chain towards the innovation side. So I think biomanufacturing is maybe the most direct way to create an impact in the more immediate sense.
Now let me go to, if anybody has any questions, you can raise your hand, but if not, I'd like to go to Marcel and ask, do you think that there's a conflict between what you're saying about technology and what Keita notices on us being consumers of social media and how that leads to more polarization?
Conflict is a bad word. I'd say that there is a difference of priorities. Different metrics are used when technologies are developed, and obviously the ultimate one should be the good of the people. But oftentimes it's a matter of testing and standardization and regulation that we can only implement after a certain technology has been created. Should we have a ban on doom scrolling? Perhaps. What if we had a cognitive level sort of layer within our phones that just give you a filtered sort of unbiased content without anything else? We would have to think how to implement it. What other implications there would be? What are we losing? Because we may gain information, but we lose the packaging, which is sometimes equally important. Would you like to respond to that, if I can call on you?
Sure. I mean, I think there's many aspects to this, but what comes to mind is you can make decisions about your usage of technologies for sure, but I think one, you have to understand that it's an addictive device, right? Like the way we treat drugs, it's the same effect. It triggers the same effects in our brain, right? So I think designing a policy around that with awareness, but also from the other side, I mean, I've been trying to tackle this in my personal life, and I find that when I find meaningful engagements in the real life, whether it be volunteering or research or going to museums, I think art is very important. You don't necessarily lean towards it as much because your life in every day is fulfilling. So that's why I'm saying it's from the other side of it. We can't disproportionately only invest in defense, and I say this is coming from a country that borders Russia, and I think we should invest a lot in defense. But I'm also saying that you must have people on the other side of that coin, and people need nourishment that's outside, that is human, that speaks to you, that you look at the painting and it makes you feel something, or you listen to a song and it makes you feel something. And this is something that technology, social media can't do. So do I have an exact solution to how to send all? No, I'm saying that it's a dimension similar to how ESG is now considered in investing. I think this is the human as prism that we need to apply when we consider also in investing in our countries.
I'll stick with the view that science is an art.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now we have a question from the audience, or a comment or a suggestion. I guess we will see very soon.
Thank you. It is actually a question. And it's a question to each of you. So in Davos earlier this year, there's always the Edelman Trust Barometer presented, which is a snapshot of where's the world, where are the people with their levels of trust. And the findings were quite sobering. And the one sentence I took away was that now we have highly aggrieved societies. And when you're in grief, you're very often not doing stuff. And you are all doers. You all are on the forefront of really bringing more positives to society. So I just wondered if you could give us each, in a very short sentence, what is it that gives you hope? Because that's what people really need. And I think you as young leaders are the ones that others are looking up to and wanting to hear from you. So I would be really interested to hear, in a brief statement, what is each of your hope drivers. Thank you.
That's amazing. Let's start at the top. Let's start with Marcel, and then we'll move our way up.
I'd say that the most hopeful I am when the new information comes. So just novelties and the very fact that I can assess them. So as I said, freedom and flexibility.
Strong. It's a very good question. And I must say, when on the first day, the first panel, somebody were talking about whether we're at a tipping point or reshuffling of the world order, and I was, God forbid, please don't tell me it's a tipping point, because, I mean, we have to live through this. So I think a very valid question. For me, I think that's just my interactions with my peers, right? And I'm within a very select group, but in everyday life, everybody has a very specific and very interesting point of view. And for me, it's just fascinating to learn more about it, whether it's cross-culturally, cross-communities, and things like that. So personal interest, but I think that's what gives me hope.
Well, through my work in informal education in Jordan, we've worked with over 80 schools so far. Nothing gives me hope more than the new generation. We are living in an amazing time right now. Like I said, AI and all these new technologies are there at our fingertips. And youth are just as excited to make positive change in the world. Generation Z is a very excited generation. They are a generation that care about social inclusion. They care about equality. Every day that I'm around them, I'm reminded of hope, and the world will be a better place. It's an exciting time.
Thank you very much for the remarks. I mean, I think this esteemed audience is quite well aware of the reports that you produce. Web reports are quite respected, and in that sense, I think the most important component that has been also analyzed this year was also social cohesion. That is why I wanted to cover in my remarks as well. What gives me hope is that connectivity is much more enhanced right now. So 2026 is a year that at a length reach, we have opportunities, we have amazing research, we have experience-based, practice-based perspectives. So with a call, we can connect with every continent right now. Look at us in our panel. We have a massive amount of diversity. So by seeing this, by observing this as a social scientist, I cannot keep myself without getting excited. So that is definitely making me quite excited and also gives me hope about the tomorrow. That is exactly why we should definitely listen each other. We should definitely make sure that we listen each other and understand dynamics in the society. Baku is a great example for that. Such a diverse city. We have Muslim communities, we have Christian communities, we have Jewish communities. They are living in this society for centuries. So Baku is also not alone in this region. This region is having tons of stories, tons of cohesion, coexistence stories. That is exactly why I'm super hopeful for tomorrow. And with these strong leaders, I believe we can make it happen. And I believe very strongly tomorrow will be much more prospects than today. Tomorrow much more connected than today. That is exactly why I think those remarks will be my reflections in your question. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. It's a very interesting question. I should ask other people the same question, because this is so hard to keep going. I wouldn't lie. This is not easy task, especially when you work on social justice issues. This is something that you can give up easily. There is a lot of toxicity. There is a lot of hate speech. There is a lot of harmful messages that we may receive because no one wants change. Everyone is very, comfortable in the places they are. But three things that keep me going is the family I'm coming from. The second is beneficiaries I'm working with. And third, the beauty of diversity that I keep on experiencing every time I meet young people and young leaders and young peers like that. And the beneficiaries that we work with are people who they don't have access to these spaces, and being able to become their voice sometimes and choose to be part of the solution is something that gives me hope. I could complain, until the morning, but then we do small things, and even all those small things, they might not change much statistics, but when we hear their stories, that's what keeps us going. And the family, because my both grandparents, they were part of World War II, and since my childhood, they were always teaching us love instead of hate. While you would expect that in certain settings in the world, we see the hate everywhere. On social media, we see the hate in interactions. And this sense of diversity, the beauty of diversity and beauty of humanity, I had this in my childhood, memories that my grandma said the war was not against Germans, it was against fascism. And, you shouldn't, be stereotypical or judge people because of where they come from. You should be open to listen to their stories. You should be open to have empathy towards them. And this message keeps me going. And the leadership of my grandparents from that time is one of the guiding stars for me right now. And the last point I wanted to make is about the traveling experience and working, volunteering experience abroad, and also in local areas in Azerbaijan. That gave me so much perspective of understanding what is going on in grassroots levels, and understanding of how privileged I am and how I shouldn't take it for granted, and making sure that others have at least some opportunities and some access to that. And that's, I think, what keeps us going, at least me going.
Yeah, 2 or 3 sentences.
It's going to be more than 3.
Okay.
Yeah, I think today only 25% of diseases have any medication for them whatsoever. For 75%, we have none. And of those 25%, the majority are not available for most of the world. Many are still toxic, and the vast majority are not curative. And so, I worked at the Gates Foundation during the pandemic, and I got to see this technology, mRNA, come onto the stage. And it was able to solve a virus that the world had not seen before with a lot of speed, great scale, was able to reach many parts of the world, and this was very inspiring to me. And so I think that we live in a time, again, of science that is so incredibly exciting, and we do live in a time of conflict, but there is something about scientists. Scientists were able to thrive through Soviet Russia. Persecuted Jews were able to do great science after escaping. We have, there's great science that came from scientists who had to live through the Cultural Revolution. Scientists are very good at producing good science through and after oppression. And I think there's something about that resilience. I think funding is a necessary precondition for good science to be done, but science has always been able to prevail. And so I'm very excited to be working in a time that is actually so exciting on the scientific front. There is a lot of work to be done.
Amazing. And I'll finish off with what keeps me motivated is the incompetence of some very destructive leaders, but also what gives me hope is the incompetence of some very destructive world leaders. Thank you very much. Now we have the next panel immediately after.
Okay. Good evening. We, the youth of the world, 6 countries represented, 6 amazing talents, will have the opportunity to help close this amazing forum with you. Shakespeare said there is no darkness without ignorance. So tonight we're going to try to unravel ourselves toward truth, some meaning. These leaders are going to paint a picture of what is the psyche of the rising generation. We are going to reimagine multilateralism. We are going to be painters with our brush and hopefully inspire. More importantly, there's 130 active conflicts in over 60 countries today. This has doubled in 15 years. So we want, as a young generation, to dismantle false statements, and we are looking for new symbols. Each of these individuals are symbols in their work. And so we're going to go to Ben Lutz from the United States, interfaith expert, has dedicated his career to peace building and reimagining Track 2 diplomacy.
Thank you. Hello, marhaban and salam. I am so undeniably grateful to be here, and all my thanks to NGIC for organizing this incredible days of convening, but more importantly, giving us and the panel before unparalleled access to world leaders, thoughts, and engagement. Thank you so much for making this a reality. When I think about reimagining multilateralism, I really focus on grassroots and people-to-people campaigns, and I will define that in 2 sort of major sections: people-to-people diplomacy and youth empowerment. In people-to-people diplomacy, my focus has been professionally and academically, global peace building and interfaith community building. When I say that, I think it's very, very powerful and impactful to actually directly engage with those affected at the heart of conflict, not excluding them from the table, the narrative, or the negotiations. In my professional expertise, I'm actually going to give you all practical and real examples of global peace building and interfaith engagement, as well as youth empowerment, how I redefine multilateralism. So, professionally, I work at Mediators Beyond Borders International, MBBI, a global peacebuilding nonprofit headquartered in Washington, D.C., that focuses on social cohesion, peace-able practices, and local capacity building initiatives. One really fabulous example that I'm thrilled to have worked with, happened only 2 months ago, was the ASEAN Youth Program, which brought together young peace builders all across the ASEAN region. All 11 countries were represented, bringing them together to collaborate, connect, and network, kind of similar to our program, but specifically targeted with ASEAN communities and young people in that space. That type of program is really powerful because not only it amplifies the voices of youth, which is always important, but directly gives those young people skills, trainings, support, coaching, and mentorship to actually implement those programs back in their host communities. The biggest ethos of MBBI and myself as a peace builder is to give local communities the access and skills to do find the solutions and implement them themselves. Outsourcing that work is almost never effective because the heart and reality of the future of that community is not involved in that decision-making process. And so programs like the ASEAN program we have done recently gives those young peace builders across the ASEAN region direct support and access to go back to their home community and solve whatever issues they may be having, as well as a network of other young people around their age focused on similar peace-building initiatives. Another program we have is called the Trust Network, which is based throughout the United States. It was founded in 2020 to counteract the upcoming potential and eventual election violence in the 2020 election, and has continued as an early warning, early response platform, bringing together organizations across the US that don't often collaborate, community mediation centers, data centers, and peace-building organizations to work on US social cohesion initiatives. As an American that focuses on global peace building, it's not often that American organizations focus domestically, and this Trust Network actually provides that space. The other element, and which was the focus of my doctorate and dissertation, is interfaith community engagement. On this panel alone, there are 4 different faiths, and in this room, many, many more. Faith is such a vital identity for the majority of people in the world, and if you don't include faith when it comes to peace negotiations or engagements, you will not be effective. I'll say that again. If you don't include faith in all elements of peace negotiations, you will not be effective. It's because it's how people live their lives, and if you aren't cognizant and inclusive in that space, then communities don't grow and thrive. Firstly, Ramadan Kareem, to all those celebrating, but these upcoming next weeks are really powerful for faiths all across the world. We have Easter and Passover and Nowruz and Eid al-Fitr and Navaratri and other really powerful religious convenings, moments of reflection, and opportunities upcoming. And to celebrate that with faith communities across the globe is really powerful. The other fact of reimagining multilateralism is youth empowerment. This youth program is really powerful, but I would say starting even younger is really effective and valuable to allow younger students and education opportunities at an earlier age to develop the skills and leadership skills that are needed. There's a leadership crisis. We've talked about it often throughout all the panels here that multilateral institutions are facing leadership crises because they aren't focusing on the needs of people. They aren't servant leaders. They aren't supporting. And so organizations that I have worked with, which I'll share very shortly, focus on giving youth those direct skills. The one that I'm the largestly involved with is called HOBY, H-O-B-Y, Hugh O'Brien Youth Leadership, which brings together high school sophomores, age 16, all across the globe, together physically to talk about volunteerism, community service, leadership, and again, youth engagement skills. I'm myself an alumni of this program, and my direct current professional career and academic journey in interfaith dialogue and peacebuilding directly stems from when I was 16 and learned those skills at the program when I was selected to represent my high school and community. These types of programs for young people are so powerful because it gives them lifetime skills, upskilling, training, community to actually focus and support as it leads to future leadership initiatives down the future. The last piece I'll highlight before I wrap up is the Y20, which is the youth advisory component to the G20. As you may be aware, the G20 is being hosted in the United States this year, and so all of the youth organizations that are relevant to the Y20 will be convening in Washington, D.C. later this year. I myself, as the chair of this summit, will be convening this programming, collaborating with the US G20 team, and bringing together these young people all across the G20 nations to negotiate policy points under 5 major themes. These themes will be collaborated into one full communique, directly advising G20 leaders on the key priorities of youth all across the globe. I recognize the G20 leaves out many countries internationally. I understand that piece. But at least the opportunity to give G20 young people direct access to government leaders, world change makers, and decision makers is really powerful. And quite frankly, the only other space I've ever seen globally that does that is here at NGIC, giving us, the young leaders on this panel and the panel before, direct access and parallel support is so powerful. And so I'm thrilled to take the lessons I've learned from these 4 days here in Baku directly to Washington, DC in August of this year. Thank you so much, shukran and shok sahul, for the time to be here. Thank you.
I can't help but think of, I am a person through others. My humanity is tied to yours. Ben, thank you for that. And we're going to move now to Azerbaijan with Java to opine really on ethics, AI, and migration. A very challenging Venn diagram.
Thank you, Pascal. I'm Jawahir. I'm from Azerbaijan. Currently, I work as a leading advisor, civil servant at the State Agency for Public Service and Social Innovations. And also, I'm a part-time teacher at Baku State University. And also, I'm a PhD student studying and doing a research in AI ethics and also migration governance in the world. Actually, I'm specifically considering some Caucasus countries, but I'm still doing my research review. And yeah, today we're going to discuss about AI ethics, migration, and case for multilateral governance. Before I proceed with my speech, I would like to tell you a little bit of a story. So when I was doing my MSc at the University of Oxford, my lecturer at the first session in our class, he asked us that he brought a toy with him. It was a robot, and he asked us that, okay, would you like this toy to replace me? And we didn't give a response, and he told us that, okay, you can wait, take your time. We still have Michaelmas term, and you still have Hillary term. After those terms, you can give me your response. And we didn't still give him a response. Now, in this form, I understand why we didn't give this response. And I asked the same question to my students at Baku State University. The response was different. And at the end of my speech, I'm going to tell you about the response that I've received from my students. We are living through a transformation in how states govern human mobility. And today, artificial intelligence is used to screen visa applications, asylum claims, predict migration flows, and conduct biometric border surveillance, and match migrants in the labor market. And from Europe to border agencies in North America and the Gulf, algorithm systems are increasingly making decisions that determine whether a person can move or seek safety. So this is not a future scenario, actually. This is a scenario that today is happening. And we have built a new architecture of migration governance, and we have built it faster than our ethical and legal frameworks can follow. So when we look at the greatest dangers of AI migration, AI in migration governance, it's not that machines will make mistakes. It's not about that. Machines always make mistakes, and we can see that. And the greatest danger is that machines will make our old mistakes. This is the biggest challenge for us to solve. And at scale, at speed, and with the appearance of objectivity. AI systems learn from historical data. But our historical migration data is not neutral, unfortunately. It reflects decades of discriminatory policies, structural inequalities, and geopolitical hierarchies. When a model is trained on biased data, it doesn't correct that bias, it amplifies it. So, beyond border management, artificial intelligence is transforming the very reason people migrate. The biggest question is that how the global labor markets are going to operate. We are entering an era in which AI will displace certain categories of work, particularly routine, low-skill, mid-skill tasks, while simultaneously creating new demand for digital, technical, and creative competences. This has profound implications for migration governance and migration policies. Countries that have historically relied on labor migration will face new questions. So let's look at these questions. Which workers do we want? Which skills do we need? And and what sort of people we really need and should enter to our country. This is not simply an economic question. It's a question of dignity, sovereignty, and global equity. We are at risk of building a world in which artificial intelligence is simultaneously automates away the jobs that once gave migration its purpose and automates the borders that once gave migrants their opportunity. This forum today has asked us to think about bridging divides in a world in transition. I want to argue that AI governance in migration is one of the most urgent places where that bridge must be built. We need international ethical standards for AI in migration, standards that require transparency, accountability, and the right to human review of automated decisions. We need global frameworks that bring together governments, technology companies, civil society, and critically, migrants themselves. The organizations such as UN and regional bodies have begun their conversation. Unfortunately, the conversations are too slow to proceed, and technology is faster than this conversation. So in a world increasingly governed by great power rivalry and transactional arrangements, multilateral governance of AI may seem idealistic. But it is not optional, because the alternative, a race to deploy AI at borders with no shared standards and no accountability, will produce exactly the kind of division this forum is trying to bridge. I am a part of Generation Z, and we have grown up in an era of algorithms, and we have seen their potential to connect, to educate us, and to create, let's say, new scenarios for future. We have also seen their dangers as well. And let me answer the question that I asked to my students. They gave me the answer, actually. They told me that, yes, maybe that teacher can be an assistant teacher to you and can help you with the daily tasks, the tasks that I'm doing already, like printing and doing some other stuff. And I think they don't have any desire to change me with any AI robot, any bot, but they usually ask me whether you suggest us to use AI or not. I always encourage them to use because it's important. I never encourage them to use ChatGPT. I always encourage them to use Cloudy. And yes, and they are using it, and I think it's quite effective in their daily lives and also in their research, as well. And Azerbaijan stands at the crossroads of East and West, of tradition and transformation. We understand perhaps better than the most what it means to navigate a world in transition. And we understand that the greatest transitions are not technological. They are about the choices we make together. So artificial intelligence will shape the future of migration. And I hope it's going to be helpful for us all, and we are going to use it ethically in our governance and in our lectures and in everything. Thank you.
Thank you for a cogent assessment, a very difficult issue. Nonetheless, we're going to travel to Kazakhstan to meet and hear from a beautiful mind, Nur Sultan.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief with my 2 points. First of all, water is a potential source of conflict. As we can see, the world now is busy with conflicts, regional and global conflicts. Water is the next source of conflict. It's the next risk, and it's growing quietly. Coming from Kazakhstan and Central Asia, water is, as you may know or may not know, we face one of the most acute water challenges globally, yet we are not dominate global climate agenda, global climate talks in any forum. So I think this also pro and con to us, because Central Asia solved this issue, regional issue, through regional dialogue, regional peace, and through regional platforms, and it gave us some sort of a stability. And it is also, I have to also point out that Central Asian countries are interdependent on transboundary rivers. So basically water interlinks with almost every part of the thing we interact with. And we cannot solve only water infrastructure, and let alone the social cohesion, water energy nexus, water food nexus. So we always have to come up with, through integrating, public sector has to come up with integrating private sector, civil society, and communities to be part of the decision-making process. And I think also it's also worth mentioning that Central Asia recently, like in a couple of years, our region has already shown that regional challenge can be addressed through dialogue, compromise, and cooperation. So this is our theme, multilateralism. I don't quite subscribe to global multilateralism, because not every country has the same starting point. So solving it regionally, which kind of we share the same problems, the same challenges, it's always beneficial to solve it together, and to, most importantly, compromise. So my second point is to, when coming up with solutions, I like to think it in a supply and demand issue. So from the supply side, there is always has to be a transparent governance, and we always have to communicate with the public, with the communities, how we govern any resources. It is beneficial to trust, to build trust, to establish it, and to maintain beneficial trust for both parties, as Ben mentioned, because social cohesion is I think it's one of the most crucial part when solving environmental challenges. And yeah, if we, to wrap up, if we want address the challenges together through integrating, through engaging all the stakeholders, the next generation will suffer the challenges. The next generation will face the consequences, and they will have to live with it. Thank you.
We've momentarily zoomed and contended with a historic and futuristic challenge in water. But more importantly, we're now going to move to Europe and a Croatian view in relation to frontier tech, leadership, and so much by Dalia.
Thank you for giving me the floor, dear Pascal. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear fellow young leaders and friends, we gather here under the theme of bridging divides. And yet, the divides have never been wider, nor the tools to bridge them more powerful or more dangerous. Amid geopolitical turbulence, we have entered an era where emerging technology will reshape the life that we know. Technology does not wait for consensus, but humanity cannot afford to move without it. It is in a great need for a functional multilateralism. Artificial intelligence holds tremendous potential to save lives, to advance medicine, and unlock human progress. But the same infrastructure can enable surveillance, manipulation, and in extreme scenarios, an autonomous elimination of life. These are not hypothetical risks. They are emerging realities which cannot be contained by any single nation alone. Yet, instead of uniting on governance, arms race is fragmenting the very venues meant to address them. This is why human-centered approach is not an add-on. It is the baseline which every governance choice must be measured against. Human security must become our compass, not as a slogan, but as an operating principle. What multilateralism 2.0 demands is twofold: the courage to regulate what can harm us, and the vision to accelerate what can heal us. This requires private-public partnerships and sustained investment in technology that serves people, economies, peace, and security. I know this is possible. Even in these dark times, I have witnessed small bits of persistent glimpses of multilateralism actually trying to prevail. In conference rooms where diplomats from opposing sides choose dialogue over deadlock. And the most effective diplomacy I have seen did not come from the loudest or most stubborn of voices. It came from those who understood that the goal is not to win the negotiation, but to hold a space open long enough for a solution to emerge. These glimpses of hope tell us something powerful. There is still a will, at least from the bottom-up levels, to preserve multilateralism as much as possible. This is the final wake-up call, not just for better systems, but for better leadership. Leadership that serves people and the planet. And yes, we need more women, we need more youth shaping these same decisions, not beside the table, at the table. Let us build a multilateralism worthy of the people it claims to serve. And let us leave this room believing, as much as I do, that unity is still possible. Thank you.
A terrific outlook on the compromising spirit in action. And on that note, we now move from Europe to the African Union. I'm not going to hold it against you, but I don't support Manchester United, Brooke. And please paint, enliven, inspire us on the potential of Africa.
Thank you, Pascal. But sorry, I don't agree with you.
I'm a City fan, that's the problem. So we have this Manchester divide right now.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, organizers of this inspiring global forum, salam. It's an honor and privilege to join you here today and to share the stage with these incredible young leaders. I'm so excited to see the impact they're all going to have in the world and the amazing work they're already doing. I am from the youngest and fastest growing continent, and by 2050, 1 in 4 people on Earth will be African. Our cities are growing, our workforce is young and capable, we have land, food, energy, and minerals. And yet, Africa remains on the sidelines of the global economy. We produce only a tiny fraction of the world's economic output. So you might ask, what are we missing? It's easy to point fingers, but the truth is that the greatest obstacle to African prosperity is us ourselves. Right now, almost half of African nations are experiencing armed conflict. 90% are facing serious public corruption. Over the centuries, we have been colonized, kidnapped, and killed. We were exploited for our labor, our land, and our resources. We have seen the worst of humanity. But our history is not our destiny. Today, we have the power to break the cycle, to turn wounds into wisdom, to join together, get organized, and step forward into a new era of African cooperation and success. We have all the ingredients, but as we have seen, these building blocks alone aren't going to create a prosperous Africa. To reach our potential, we need unity. Every nation on the continent has its own unique identities and stories and traditions. These must be protected and also celebrated. But we cannot allow our diversity to be our downfall. The only way for African people to succeed today is for the African people to work together. All of this violence, all of this corruption that we see today is for short-term power and economic gain. But let me tell you something about money and power. We're not going to find it at the end of a gun. As of now, every African Union member, except Eritrea, has signed the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. This is laying the foundation for the largest free trade area in the world, and has the potential to remove tariffs on 97% of trade within Africa. In the coming years, West Africa will see the introduction of a single currency, a major step toward an African continental currency. This is where we find long-term wealth. There is growing support for a Pan-African passport that would allow all Africans to travel, live, and work freely across the continent. Let's be real, it should have been done a long time ago. Across sub-Saharan Africa, primary school enrollment has grown dramatically in the past decade. The gender gap in education is dropping, youth literacy is now over 75%, and more young Africans are entering universities than ever before. This is where we find long-term power. The Africa I want to see is one where African talents leads the way in building infrastructure, starting businesses, and expanding access to education, healthcare, and social services. Where we have a strong foreign relations without strong foreign dependency. Where a new generation leads the way in public service so that our leaders on the youngest continent look more like the people they represent. That's what we can be. The future Africa is African, and we choose cooperation over conflict, integrity over corruption, and unity over division. There is no limit to what our continent can achieve. We are stronger together. Thank you so much for your time.
And with that qualitative and quantitative overview, we've been injected with a sense of what is emerging as well. And so the last official intervention of this forum is with Suleha from Pakistan. So we have the remaining remarks of our verbal shuttle diplomacy here tonight.
Thank you. And thank you first to the Nizami Ganjavi Center for bringing us together for some deeply inspiring conversation over the last few days. Let me take you back to early 2025. The richest man in the world, Elon Musk, appears on stage holding a chainsaw as a symbol of something with which to cut down budgets so that there could be government efficiency. Not long afterwards, food banks serving the poorest people around the world closed their doors. The world wakes up to news that foreign aid programs are being frozen as the administration moved to dismantle USAID. More than 66,000 metric tons of food, enough to feed roughly 3.5 million people for an entire month, sits stranded and rotting in warehouses across Djibouti, Dubai, South Africa, and Houston. But the deeper issue is not one person or one administration's actions. The deeper issue is a structural question about power. Should systems that affect millions of lives all over the world depend on the whims of a certain country or a single individual or a handful of powerful millionaires? In recent years, global development has increasingly intersected with private wealth, private technology, and billionaire philanthropy. Innovation from the private sector is absolutely essential. It can be enormously valuable. but global public goods cannot depend on the discretion of individuals who are not accountable to the global public. The world cannot be held hostage to their preferences. The international development community in Pakistan, where I worked, was divided at the time. A lot of powerful work was halted in its tracks. I too lost a research project that I was directing for the US Institute of Peace, but in the large scale of things and how this has affected so many vulnerable people's lives, that's nothing. But there was a lot of spirited debate too about the role of multilateral organizations and international development. With the IMF program a strong point of contention, there were very valid critiques of imperialism and elite capture too. As a scholar of post-colonial studies working in the sector, I am certainly no stranger to these critiques. But it is important to say something. Critique of international development and the role of multilateral organizations is legitimate and necessary, but critique is not the same thing as dismantling organizations. That's just being a hater, and we have far too much hate in this world already. We must ask difficult questions. Who defines development priorities? How do we prevent elite capture within global institutions? We must critique what we love only to make it better, but there is a difference between criticizing things to make them better and dismantling them without building alternatives, stranding the most vulnerable populations all over the world. If we care about outcomes, then our task is reform. It is not demolition. It is not chainsaws. Multilateralism is necessary because of its institutionalizing potential. My research is focused on empathy, and I want to challenge how we can best help each other as a global community. There's this idea that empathy and feeling bad for each other can automatically produce better outcomes. A lot of humanitarian programs rely on this. But if we leave outcomes to our imagination, our ability to see through each other's eyes and imagine ourselves through each other's shoes, we are also subject to the limits of this imagination. Empathy can be deeply parochial. As humans, we tend to feel empathy for those who are similar to us. The psychologist Paul Bloom has noted that this is a phenomenon that is intrinsic to human nature. The cognitive scientist Steven Pinker, for all his arguments in favor of empathy, ultimately concludes, and I quote, "The ultimate goal should be policies and norms that become second nature and render empathy unnecessary. Policies and norms are, after all, far more reliable guarantors of behavior than affect alone. In other words, empathy by itself is not enough. It needs to be institutionalized. And that is where multilateral organizations of multiple countries and communities come into the picture. Without these institutions, we are subject to the whims of individuals. Without these institutions, empathy becomes selective. A policymaker, or a trillionaire, as it were, may feel deep concern for one group, which we have certainly seen in Elon Musk's public advocacy for the more personally relatable white South Africans, while overlooking millions of others. Indeed, we have seen similar dynamics in all of us when it comes to global responses to crises in Ukraine and Gaza as well. And that is why leaving things to empathy alone or to single individuals or single countries can be very dangerous. This is how we get splintered across identity lines instead of functioning as a global community. The point is that empathy alone is uneven, and we need multilateral organizations. They transform uneven human concerns into rules, funding mechanisms, and cooperative frameworks that operate across borders. Are these institutions perfect? What is perfect? Of course, there's not perfect. But dismantling these institutions just because they are not perfect simply creates more problems. The challenges that we face today, from climate change to global health to AI governance, they're fundamentally collective problems that affect us all. No one country, company, or individual can solve them alone. And this is why we need multilateral organizations to function in a way that helps us all. Thank you.
One of my favorite words is interdependence. And through that, we cooperate and we find togetherness and a sense of belonging. And I think we heard a lot of that embedded. We have 8 wonderful minutes for provocations as well as questions. I see a gentleman, please. Maybe just one moment for the microphone. You can also stand on the chair and scream if you need to.
Testing. Hello, thank you all for your time. I've gotten to know some of you. I want to pose you a question. How do you see the breakdown in globalization, a return to regionalism, and the loss of faith and trust and goodwill? How do you, as young leaders moving into this world, seek to rebuild it, whether through institutions, multilaterally, or minilaterally? What do you believe is the solution to some of these maladies?
Tremendous. Let's go to Brooke first.
Thank you for your question. So, as I said in my speech, I'm more focused on a combined Africa. So, 14 to 15% of African intertrade happens within Africa, but the rest, 85%, is outside. And I feel we need to connect each other more. I feel we should give a hand to one another within the continent of Africa. So that's what I want to happen in the near future.
And Ben, can you?
Yeah, definitely. So I've mentioned a lot of the networks of young people, younger than even this panel, and starting those skills early. I think that's a great way to solve part of this problem. A big sort of debate in the peace-building community is the difference between stopping war and building social cohesion. Both are vital, let me be very clear. But the distinction is negative peace is physically stopping conflict, positive peace is growing the community so there's no backsliding or additional violence or larger scale conflict as a result. And I think all of the above is the way to answer your question. Mini and multilateral positive peace focuses. Obviously, negative peace has to come first to negate the conflict going on. But once there is a post-conflict opportunity and space, giving young people, again, even younger than us, through education programs inside of schools, opportunities for leadership and volunteerism, I could keep going on, but giving young people a direct networking space, whether that's through social media or physically, honestly both would be ideal, really helps to solve the crises that we see in the world, and honestly ultimately build positive peace. Even things that are not necessarily peace, like water security, absolutely leads to peace because communities don't have to worry about receiving their next glass of water, right? So having those opportunities in collaborative networks is a way to solve your problem, the problems in the world.
Thank you, Ben. Dalia.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. These are the challenges we haven't chose. They chose us. This is unfortunately something that is left for us to clean up. So please, dear leaders, help us. We have so many things to do.
Well, through that responsibility, there's an ownership equation that the next gen is entering at present. Shava, please.
Thank you very much. I think really good question. I think 2 points. First of all, there's always a role model, good or bad, right? So I think young generation gets the knowledge from gets the knowledge and experience from the current leaders, right? So I think it's quite crucial to pass on the knowledge and experience to the next generation to have very sustainable and fruitful life, I guess. Yeah.
I guess that's, let's say, challenging, and also with the young leaders who have optimistic views as well. I think it is important to encourage every single young leader to get more educated as they can, to be able to make solutions and proceed with the solutions themselves. And I think it's important to have these three main things in this, let's say, diagram. First, knowledge. Second, not to stop the aspiration. It's important to have aspiration. And third, it's important to take every lesson into account and then learn from the mistakes. So the first, the mistakes, knowledge, and aspiration. So these key three things, I guess, are going to give us the best solutions ever.
Thanks for the thought-provoking questions, and all of my panelists have offered very valuable responses. I just want to briefly add to this by saying I often think that we have failed young people today. We have prepared them for a world that has abruptly changed, and the breakdown of multilateral organizations and systems, even employment opportunities, has been shameful. And this is more true of people even younger than I am. I've spoken to a lot of leaders all over the world who share this thought. I think there is a recognition that the world we are handing down to the younger generations is not the best world. What is the solution? It is not hopelessness. The solution is to invite young people into corridors of power and really hand over the reins to young people for things that directly affect their future. There is often so much rhetoric about young people not engaging in politics and being disenfranchised and not really caring about these things and almost becoming apathetic. But the truth is, when young people are given politicians or a chance to represent themselves, then they do engage with politics. We saw this in Zohan Mamdani's mayoral campaign, and now that he has become mayor of New York, he is going to the young people directly, speaking to them, hearing concerns of tenants who are struggling with housing issues, for instance, right? These are the things that matter to young people. So we need to get young people in these halls of power, give them the reins over things that affect their future directly, specifically things like climate change. Pakistan, where I come from, 60% of the population is under the age of 30, right? And most of the leadership is obviously not in that age group, and that is true globally. So we need to instead of just encouraging or criticizing young people, we need to let them be the decision makers because this is their future.
Okay. And so we've heard, we have some more questions. Fantastic. We'll go with the madame to the other madame and then the monsieur.
Thank you very much for amazing organization. I'm Sombem Senzada, robotics researcher and engineer and upcoming Schwarzman scholar. My question is going to be about collaboration with researcher. How do you think future of the research and collaboration with policymakers as we are transitioning towards AI to robotics, which will be more physical, and we have to be more careful about that? Thank you very much.
I assume that was an open-ended question. Okay, I'm going to direct that to Java as a researcher.
All right. So thank you for your question. It's very, very interesting and very good question. I guess the future of research is going to be, as now I'm an active researcher, and and also I'm teaching you this research skills and the qualitative and quantitative both. And I guess the future of research is going to be, there are positive sides and there are negative sides. I think from positive sides perspective, I would say that it's growing. There are a lot of research papers are published every year, even when, for example, a few years ago, I was a student at Baku State University before I went to study abroad. And we weren't really actively publishing papers. We weren't really involved in writing the papers. But now I can see that there is a transition with the implementation of AI and with the implementation of the technology. I think it's at the positive side. So students are getting more knowledge, and which is very good. But at the other hand, for example, we are facing a lot of questions that how is it ethical? For example, we are every time, okay, we are creating new questions in the research. We are trying to come up with new solutions, with new questions, and also our research should be another new, let's say, introduction to another research. So it's a question. Sometimes it can be repetitive, sometimes it can be new, and sometimes, yeah, I think it can be sometimes a problem for us. But I would say it's quite positive. I'm very positive-minded about this, about the future of research within the age of AI and technology. And I would advise all of you to be positive about this as well. Thank you.
Madame in the third row, your question? Or the monsieur? Or the fourth row, then, madame. Thank you. We'll go to you next.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. First of all, I'd like to thank every single speaker for the wonderful speech and for the highlighting specific topics. And I'd like to ask a question for everyone. Since you highlighted, for example, topics about the importance of water, about the development of specific region, about the educational opportunities, about the public service. Right now, considering what's happening in the world, we're seeing that international law doesn't work anymore. It doesn't respect it, unfortunately. The UN lost its decision-making power and authority. And unfortunately, some superpowers are overusing this. So what do you think? Because I think that the corners, like every topic which you highlighted, can only be successful only after implementation, the new world order, which is functioning, and you're having a peace and stability all across the world. So my question is, what young people can do and must do in order to bring back this importance of following the international order and respecting the UN Charter? Thank you.
Okay, let's start with Dalia, one by one, ending with Ben, on the status of international law from your standpoint.
Thank you very much for your questions. I believe young people should pick battles they can fight. Everything else is a group effort. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So, like you said, we're required to work together in order to have peace. But what we're lacking at the moment is compassion. What we're lacking at the moment is people thinking about other people instead of, being selfish. What we can see in the world at the moment, in the Middle East, it's sad to see world leaders saying, I'm going to bomb such country, such country. That's the lack of value, as the past young leaders on the stage said. The lack of value, we're losing it. So the first thing we can do as young leaders is have value, trust one another, listen to each other. So that's what I believe in.
Thank you for your question. And I guess with one word, we should say that we need to be optimistic and we need to be positive in this world, in this challenging world, because positivity and optimistic view are gonna take us to the forward. Because even in the negativity, we can find optimism, we can find positivity. If we look at it through that perspective, young people specifically, our world, I think, will be the better place.
I think international law sits above most of the countries, and some countries, they like to prioritize their national interest. So again, coming back to the very first question, it's about role model. The new generation is growing up seeing this role model, whether to follow this international order or do we prioritize national interests. So I think solution to that is a very complex approach, I would say, but the core principle, I would say, is to compromise.
So briefly, a couple of things. Invest in learning as much as you can. remain hopeful, remain united as a community, and remain critical. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I very much share the hope that Marcel, Barat, Miriam, Sophia, Lynn, and Keita in the previous panel all shared. I think the ability of young people to network, collaborate, and vocalize what they want is the way forward here. Thank you.
Okay. Well, given that we are out of time, Madame, I'm gonna ask you to privately ask us off stage. We've made an effort to de-risk the risks. We are going to pick up the phone. We are going to get on the plane. We are going to continue to show up. And we are very grateful for the 13th convening of the Baku Forum. And for that, this panel closes.